It reminded me of all the other conversations the three of us have had, not on the podcast, about horror and grief-related art. Because especially in the last 10 years, I feel like we've had a renaissance of horror-related art playing with those themes. Examples being Haunting of Hill House, both It movies, A Ghost Story, A Monster Calls, Lake Mungo, we talked about in the podcast, Black Phone, we did too, Midsummer, Hereditary, The Night House, The Babadook, The Witch, The Ritual, the newer Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But almost all of these stories take place after the horrible event, after the loved one is killed, and it explores that aftermath. And they safely reenact the decline of whoever died to be the inciting incident of that story with the metaphor of ghosts or monsters. And it's always some sort of surreal representation of the enormity of those feelings that were conjured in whoever our protagonist is. Because those veils, or literal creature designs, are exciting and entertaining to look at. They're spooky. They can be jump scares. But even if they're bloody clowns or hulking monsters or huge-ass spiders, it's easier to look at those than it is to look at this episode, which was a staring, unblinking, unflinching portrait of Viserys's disease, decline, and death. Like we've seen, even with the time jumps, we've seen so many stages of this guy fading out.
Yeah.
And I recognize so many details that just tell me that the people involved have seen the light on this. There are people who have lived with people who have died, who worked on this show. Like, I made a quick list as I flipped through the show, which was fun to watch a second time. The extended bed rest, the fading in and out of consciousness, the pallor, sheen, and color of his skin, his posture, the labored breathing, his voice, the general sense of pain, his scraggly hair, and the way his face was almost slack, the weakness and intent, the struggle of every labored action. All of that is heartbreaking. Like, yes, that's why ghost stories work, because they make that almost more presentable and sad. Where someone's more buttoned up, and then you can feel the tragedy that they're not here anymore. But this was like a body horror approach to that. But it wasn't just the sympathy of watching Viserys rot in this episode that fucked me up. It was accurate and haunting, yes, to everything I've seen with what cancer can do to people. But the thing that made me cry in the episode multiple times was the truth of how those around him acted. It was, Alicent had this like hollowness. Rhaenyra had this pain that just shut her down from the wonderful theatrical dramatics she's used to. And they both affected, even while sniping at each other, anytime they were in a room with Viserys, it was this blank, nonchalant horror. This like affected numbness. You could see the distance behind their eyes where they were processing all the pain and trauma they were looking at. And you can
even extend that further to Daemon. Okay, if you're going to continue to expand that point.
Sorry. Daemon's, he has this quiet and reserved look. Like, I was watching, Matt Smith is such a magnetic fucking performer.
He's so good.
But he was never pitying or fawning. When he first walks into a room with Viserys, he treats him like he's normal. And 20 years ago, he just talks to him normally. He's just like, oh, Corlys was kind of wounded in the Stepstones. And then later, when he steps in to help him get to the throne, which is obviously the best part of the episode.
Oh, God.
He doesn't grab him. He doesn't yell for the guards. He puts one hand gently on his back and whispers 2 words to him. And it's the same whisper he uses a scene later to say 2 words to Vaemond. It's that soft-spoken, lethal love. And I recognize that because that's all you can hope for when you're with someone that you're watching in decline. It's compassion without condescension. And that sort of painful loyalty I have never seen accurately represented in art before. I thought it was stunning.
It was really, really good and really, it was just tragic and so well done. And I think it was great because it brings a humanity to these characters who are all so despicable in their own ways. Like, I mean, Daemon's he's a messed up person. Rhaenyra is not a good person. Alicent is a slimy snake. And like all these people suck. But the most I think, kind-hearted person throughout this whole thing has always been Viserys, and that's what we've centered a lot of our conversations around, and how that will probably lead to his downfall. And in a way, it does, but in many ways it doesn't, because he is able to bring the humanity out of all these people in these last few moments of his life, and for them to, I mean, the joint family dinner is not a success, but there are moments of good that wouldn't have occurred otherwise. And it's great. It's a great way to humanize all these characters who have just kind of been getting nastier and nastier. And so it can become hard to sympathize with any of them. But by uniting them with this commonly, this common experience that, like, in this world and in ours, I think is really effective.
Yeah, this was honestly, throughout this episode, was you nailed it right on the head when you say humanize, because that it really did sort of bring them back down to earth,